Hello, I am Robin Taylor from Jenks Library. The first book I'll show you today is called The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. It's the first of the Night Angel trilogy, and we do carry it as ebook and digital audio. This series is a truly epic fantasy. It's set in an imagined world called Midcryu, and it starts in the kingdom of Cenaria in a capital city of the same name. The gap between the rich and poor in this city is so extreme that they may as well exist in two totally separate worlds. The series begins by following Azoth, an orphan, through his trials as a child living on the streets. He witnesses violence perpetrated by the older children in the guild, which is essentially a gang in which he is forced to be a part of in order to survive. One of these older children, named Rat, begins targeting Azoth and his friends and committing unspeakable acts against them. During this time, Azoth encounters a famed wet boy named Durzo Blint and begs to be his apprentice. A wet boy is an assassin, but better. Wet boys have better training, and unlike regular assassins, they can use magic. Durzo tells Azoth that if he kills Rat, he will train him. Throughout all of this, the reader is given glimpses into Durzo's perspective as he takes care of business, and the perspective of a duke's son as his father is sent to a distant land by order of the tyrannical God King, and a few other perspectives, but to tell you about them would give too much away. First and foremost, this series deals with assassins, and all the summaries or teasers I have seen focus only on that part, but there is so much more going on. The concepts of stealth and deception as a way of life are used to address the secrets that many in the real world, particularly trauma survivors, must keep to themselves, and even the lies that people often convince themselves of in order to keep going. If you want a gruesome and intricately plotted story set in a gritty and plausible magical world, this should be the next series that you try. There's court intrigue and drama, there's plot twists like you wouldn't believe. There are some extremely brutal scenes, just as a warning, but deep emotional connections are made, which the reader may get pulled into as well. I did hear one person say that this book is for those with a strong stomach and a soft heart, and I have to agree with that sentiment. The ebook has 715 pages. Fantasy is often used to empower victims or right injustice. This next book is a stark example of that. Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo uses dark and secretive worlds to deal with surviving trauma, but in a very different way than the Night Angel trilogy. Set in New Haven, Connecticut, this is the first and only currently published installment of the Alex Stern series. Galaxy, or Alex Stern, can see ghosts, which in this series are called Greys, and has been able to see them and interact with them for as long as she can remember. The ability has made her an outcast her entire life, and the weight of these interactions and her inability to stop them has led Alex to drug addiction and eventually dropping out of high school. While recovering in the hospital, after being the sole survivor of a vicious multiple homicide, the Dean of Yale offers her a full-ride scholarship due to her ability to see and interact with the Greys. He will allow her, who never finished high school, to attend Yale for free, with a catch. At Yale, there are 8 houses of occult magic, each specializing in a specific type, and then a 9th, the Letha, which supervises the activities of all of the others in order to ensure that ordinary people on campus and in the world do not find out about them. So the catch is that Alex has to join the Letha and help supervise the other groups. The story's action begins when a girl is murdered on campus, and Alex believes that one of the 8 houses might be responsible. It's told from multiple perspectives and at 2 different points in time. Alex's perspective is told at a present day in the spring, and her mentor, Daniel Arlington, or Darlington's perspective, picks up from when he first met Alex the fall before. Because this is the first in a series, Bardugo lays out a lot of groundwork for the system of the houses at Yale. And along with doing that, it takes a little while for the story to unfold and to learn Alex's backstory. So because of this, it does start a little bit slow. But I that this story started out really engaging nonetheless. There were a lot of questions, but I was drawn in. A warning for some readers, much like The Way of Shadows, this book is graphic in its violence. I would actually classify it as a combination horror, thriller, murder, mystery, urban fantasy, but it really does fit into all of those categories and has elements of all that comes with any of them. This is a 450-page tome and is another book for those with strong stomachs. My next story will take you from present urban fantasy to historical magical realism. Once Upon a River by Diane Setterfield. For fans of history and literary fiction, this book is for you. Once Upon a River fits more predominantly in those genres than it does fantasy, but it has elements of myth and magic, which allow me to include it in my fantasy recommendations today. On the Thames, not far outside of Oxford, there is an inn called the Swan in the village of Radcott. Side note, the physical location actually exists. At this time, other inns have their specialties, music or tobacco or gambling, but the Swan has stories. The best stories around are told at the Swan and always have been. On Midwinter's Night in the late 1880s, the regulars are gathered at the Swan telling each other stories. When stumbling in from the darkness comes a man, and in his arms what initially seems to be a puppet in the shape of a young girl. The man loses conscience immediately upon entering the inn, soaking wet and covered in blood. While the others care for him, the innkeeper's son holds on to the puppet, which is oddly heavy, and he soon realizes that despite her apparent perfection, she's a real girl. When his mother inspects the poor thing, it is clear that she is dead. She does not breathe at all. Her skin has already discolored, turning ashen, and they take her to another room and leave her to continue tending to the man. Rita, a midwife from the village, sees to his wounds, and afterwards she goes to inspect the body of the child. She was surprised to find that the child didn't carry any of the indicators of drowning. She checked the body only to find no sign of what may have killed her. Besides that, there were no marks on the body at all. The child appeared to be unblemished in every way, without a single cut or bruise. After far too long for it to be plausible, the child wakes up. But she had been dead for at least an hour, if not more. Was it a miracle? If not, then what? The girl is approximately 4 years old, but upon reawakening, she is unable to speak. The mystery of her origins hangs over the inn, and soon others come to claim the girl. Whether their claim is believable or not, there is no way to confirm anyone's tale. There are many characters in this story, and it is told from many perspectives, but all of these stories flow like tributaries into the larger one, the mystery of who this girl is and where she belongs. Once Upon a River is full of distinct and realistic characters, which make the story feel real and authentic. Don't let the large cast list fool you. Once you are following the flow of the river, the characters will not reach a standstill. All of those touched by this mysterious child's life have dealt with suffering, loss, or violence. There are parts where the story moves slowly, but much like an actual river, these are parts where the story proves to be deepest. The story is filled with a sense of magic and wonder, and placed within an age of spiritualism that prevailed despite advances in science. Once Upon a River will give you a lot to think about, so while it may not be as fast-paced as a thriller, it is full of mystery that the reader will be able to turn over for a long time after finishing its 462 pages. My next story draws from deep waters as well. We will leave the small Victorian village of Radcott and emerge into the harsh world of antebellum Virginia in The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This book is also suitable for fans of historical and literary fiction, but it has a much heavier dose of magical realism within its pages. Hiram Walker is one of the tasked, and not like others in his time, His father is also his master, the owner of the great tobacco estate of Lochless. His father sold his mother down Natchez Way long ago, and despite being able to remember literally everything else, Hiram cannot remember anything about her. The story opens at a turning point in Hiram's life, when he sees a vision of his mother water dancing while driving a carriage containing his drunken half-brother and heir to Lochless home from the races, and subsequently drives straight into the Goose River. While in the river, he sees a blue light and is somehow transported onto the river's bank. Many are relieved when his brother Maynard never resurfaces, as it is well known that under his care, Lochless would fail, and all the tasked would be sold away down south, where the work was even harder, and they would lose the ones they loved in impartial sales and deals. When Hiram was young, a tale was often circulated of his grandmother, Santee Bess, who one night escaped with 48 other slaves through the River Goose, and according to legend, they didn't just go north, they went all the way back home. With the future uncertain, and fearing the loss of the woman he loved, if only she were his, Hiram attempts to escape, but to no avail. They will never be able to get away until Hiram can unlock the same power that his grandmother had. And that it is said the great Moses, or rather Harriet, has as well. The Power of Conduction. This book has a lot of slow buildup, laying the groundwork for the hardships of life and the unique magical power which Coates puts forth within. Conduction is mysterious, and learning how it works is such a crucial part of reading this story that I dare not say more. That aside, the Water Dancer's 403 pages make for a powerful read, full of the intense potential for cruelty that humans bear. So too, it is full of hope and unshakable bonds that can be built, and how family is not always blood, but bonds you form yourself. Then finally, I have the first volume of the Witcher graphic novels by Paul Tobin with artwork by Joe Quero, called House of Glass. This and all of the other volumes of the Witcher graphic novels are available as ebooks through Hoopla, which means they can be checked out at any time. When the first season of The Witcher aired on Netflix, we started seeing a huge increase in requests for the original novels by Andrzej Sapkowski. And for those of you who have seen the show or read the books, played the games, and still want more, here you go. For those of you who have not done any of those things, I want to show you this graphic novel as a sort of gateway for fantasy in general. Unlike a lot of fantasy graphic novels, the cover artwork is more simplistic than the artwork inside. Here, take a look at the difference. Without knowing any backstory, House of Glass is certainly still extremely accessible. While along his travels, Geralt of Rivia encounters a man named Jakob. While sharing a meal, Jakob tells Geralt that his wife has been turned into a bruja, which is a type of vampire. Geralt knows that his story doesn't add up, and chooses to travel with Jakob for a time to find out the true story. They wander into a trap. Lost in the woods, they find a house and see Jakob's wife on the balcony. They go inside to find that the house is full of mysteries and hidden places. Like the others I have shown you today, this book does touch on some dark and disturbing things, as well as how those themes can be used to deal with trauma. But if I told you more, I would be giving away an unforgivable amount of information. While it is part of a series, this story has a definite beginning, middle, and end, which means it can be read as a standalone graphic novel if one chooses to do so. That's all I have for today. Thank you for watching, and links for each title will be in the comments. If you have any questions about the titles presented, feel free to comment or message the Jenks Library Facebook page, and I will get back to you as soon as possible.